Get going. Brian Townsley, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how can I not have a guy that has a hat collection that's that great on my show? In fact, I made sure to strategically place my fedora. So right here,
There you
and
go. There you
we
go.
can make it work.
Excellent. Excellent. Look, I got a cowboy hat over here too. Put that
Mhm.
on. Or a little they're everywhere. Yeah.
Hey, it works. Recently, we've been doing the Indiana Jones series as
Yeah.
a leading up to the new film. And just the iconic way that the hat works, the silhouette
Mhm.
on it, you just
Absolutely.
can't trade that for anything.
Absolutely. No, I'm actually really looking forward to the new Indy too. I was talking with my mom yesterday. We were going back and forth about how there's a theater out here where she lives. And I came out here a couple days a week just to help her out.
Mhm.
Because my dad passed a few years ago, so I just do stuff around the house and things. And we were talking about how the theater out here is really hurting. Like every time I go to a movie or she goes to a movie, it's like there's us and like six other people in the
Mhm.
theater, and this is for like new movies. And so, but I actually think the indie film will actually draw a pretty good crowd
Mhm.
because it draws from so many different generations.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about this with as just going over the echoes of all of those films that lead up to Indiana Jones. You really do
Right.
have just such a huge broad scope.
Right. Yeah, I saw that you were doing that actually, and I actually want to listen to that or watch that. I haven't yet, but that's something that I could definitely use a little bit more of an education on. I'm going to be totally frank with you. The kind of action adventure serialized
Mhm.
stuff that led up to the indie franchise, I'm not all that familiar with. So
And you know what? Half of it's garbage, so you're not missing out on too
I
much.
believe that.
We
Yeah.
hit some really good high points, though. Some of the episodes were really great. Obviously, you guys have had American Pulps on the show before, and
Mhm.
those guys were amazing for the two
Yeah,
Charles
they're
Bronson
funny.
ones we did.
Yeah, they're funny guys.
We are as funny though. I'm convinced, Ryan. We are. So transitioning from talking about Indiana Jones here, what got you into noir? Like, obviously, the fedora translates. That's our segue. What was my note was to ask you what was your first film that was noir, and what was your first book? Because obviously, I'm looking at that library behind you, and I'm like, again, this is where we know I'm going to get along with someone is when I see they have a bookshelf that's that great.
Right. Yeah. So let's see. First book, to be totally honest, would be early Chandler stuff. I
Mhm.
want to say Farewell My Lovely or The High Window was kind of my introduction to that, and kind of the stylized noir that we're oftentimes referring to when we refer
Mhm.
to noir. But I seriously, man, before that it was probably like Encyclopedia Brown. Remember
I
those
love
books?
it.
I mean, yeah, when I was a kid, those were like my absolute favorite books. So all of a sudden it was Encyclopedia Brown, and then all of a sudden that kind of transitioned
Mhm.
into Chandler and Marlowe, and before you knew it, that was all I wanted to read. That and Stephen King.
Yeah. There was a growing up as a kid, I don't know when these books came out, but it was called Chet Gecko.
Uh-huh.
And he was the author, I can't remember his name, but he was riffing on like Murder My Tweet.
Uh-huh.
He was just riffing on the Chandler and oh, come on, what's the other name? Mickey Spillane stuff
Hmm.
for setting up his plots and everything that now as an adult I look back on and go, wow, like sometimes good children's fiction can do a
Yeah.
great
Oh,
job with that.
God, you know what else? Seriously, Terrence, you know what else kind of affected me, I think? And got me, I don't know if it got me interested in writing, but just kind of I could see it kind of
Mhm.
plant some seeds there, are the choose your own adventure books.
Oh yeah.
Because every time, and then of course you make a bad decision and then you go back and go, oh no, I didn't want to do that. And then but the point is that you are making your own decisions like you would as a writer.
Mhm.
And so I used to absolutely love those books.
What was the first movie that led? What was your first noir film? And you can be broad in the definition of noir. We're not going to be purists here.
Right. I think probably the first noir that I remember when I was a kid was Night of the Hunter.
Okay, I haven't seen
With
it.
Mitchum. And it's rural, and he is a horrifying creature in it with love and hate tattooed on his neck knuckles.
Wow.
And as 1950s movies go, it's about as dark as you can get in that period,
Yeah.
honestly. And he's kind of after these two kids, but everywhere he goes, he's the preacher, so they all open their doors to him, but he's a really evil dude. That was probably the first, but then the first that I remember seeing in the theater, I was a teenager, early teen, I want to say, and I think it was probably Angel Heart.
Okay.
Mickey Rourke, Lisa Bonet, Robert De Niro, and I absolutely love that movie. Rourke is great in it. And De Niro is good also. If you haven't seen it, those of you who have not seen it out there, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, because it has one of the most truly mind flipping endings ever if you haven't seen it. So yeah, no, it's really something. But I remember being there as a teenager watching that, going, oh, okay, this is really cool. And it was, again, it takes place in the 50s. And it was New York and New Orleans. And I had already been reading the Chandler stuff, and so it just kind of was like, yeah, I really like this period. You've got the trench coats, you've got the fedoras, you've got, let's be honest, far cooler cars.
100%.
than anything we've got nowadays. And then the other problem with this is totally straying from your question, but the other problem with writing modern noir, in my opinion, is I am not a fan of the modern noir with regards to what the current phone is, or what I don't have to worry about that, and you don't in the 50s. So
we were having this conversation. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or outside the podcast, but again, because we were going through Indiana Jones stuff, can adventure work today? Like that kind of pulp adventure thing, really technology limits the experience. It makes the world too small. There's nothing new to explore. We assume that everything's around by now. And the problem with a lot of noir today is the same. Like I have definitely seen good noir today, but like I remember your interview with Nolan Knight about Gallows Dome. You had actually asked him about the phone thing. And
yeah.
It's true. Like again, it's those little things that really do make a difference on. So like I'm working on a modern con man story set in today's day and age. Here's the problem. How well does that work when you can actually look up anyone instantaneously?
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And if you'll notice, like a lot of the movies, not even movies, series, whatever else that you can stream, that they're making that would even be considered adventure or something along those lines, a lot of what they do is the first thing they do is take away the technology.
Yeah.
Like in something like The Last of Us or Walking Dead or anything like that, the very first thing you do, even though it's modern times, is you take away the technology, because the technology makes it so much harder to tell the story.
So my upcoming pulp adventure novel, which will at some point be published, when I had them on the desert island, that's one of the first things we do is we're like, okay, we need to take this tech toy away. We need to show why they A, don't know how to use it, and B, why it's not helping them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to, and you have to take that into account, but there are so many eras you can pick too. I mean, you don't, you could choose. I mean, the 50s are obviously stylized and cliched in a lot of ways, of course, but you could choose the 70s, which a lot of people have done. 70s are kind of funny, right? I mean, you've got the bad collars and on the shirts, and the bad bell bottoms, and the bad disco outfits and all that, but all the same bad decisions and life struggles are still going on. So you could do something like that. That would be fun. Early 80s would be good too.
I was just watching Columbo recently, which set in the 70s, and at least the first couple of seasons, and like that stuff, it still works. Like I make fun of, like, I think the 70s can easily be just written off as a joke, but really they do such a great job of setting up compelling mysteries and stories.
Yeah, I saw Michael Bracken, who's in the first couple of reviews, very prolific, excellent writer, but he actually is edits some anthologies sometimes also. And one of the last ones he did was all 70s detective gumshoe stories, which would be kind of fun probably. So, but
So I want to transition to talking about
yeah.
I want to make sure I get his name right. Sonny Haynes.
Sonny Haynes, yeah.
Sonny Haynes, Trunk Full of Zeros, which that is one of those names that's like that almost sounds like a Bond novel name. It's like if we took a Bond novel and squished
Mm-hmm.
it with a noir story. So I love the title. I could not
Thank
get a
you.
copy of the book ahead of the interview. So
Right.
tell me about where this book came from and when we'll be able to get a chance to read it again.
Sure. So yeah, there are no more copies of it. It is I want to say I have probably 5 or 6 copies left, period. Like that's it. That's all there are in the world. And it's going to be reissued later this year with Starlight, which I'm excited about. I'm also thinking I might throw in a story at the end that is otherwise unpublished, so that'll be kind of fun.
Ooh.
And then there's an intro that James Whelpley's written that will probably be included as well. So we're looking forward to that. We're going to put that together here towards the end of the year. But Sonny came, I'm a big fan of James Lee Burke and the Dave Robichaux books. And if you look back at a lot of the history, really, in a lot of the detective stuff, Marlowe and Spade are exceptions, but a lot of the detectives have a sidekick, and most of the time that sidekick is a lot more fun than they are.
Oh yeah, it's like Watson versus Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, you had Watson and Holmes, and in James Lee Burke with Dave Robichaux, you've got Cleet Purcell, and Cleet Purcell is his buddy, and Cleet is a lot more fun than Dave. Dave is hypocritical and kind of annoying a lot of the time, but Cleet is fantastic. And so Sonny is kind of the character I wanted to write if I didn't have the stuffy detective as the main guy.
Okay.
Kind of like the sidekick that does what he wants to do without having the straight laced guy next to him telling him no, don't do that. And so he's kind of like this id that just gets to go out there and do what he wants. And he's an incredibly flawed character. His wife has passed away. He's covered in tattoos in the 1950s, which is very rare. After his wife dies, he goes down to Mexico, works for a drug dealer down there. He's actually known as he's a person of interest in his wife's murder, and he was with LAPD. So he leaves, goes to Mexico, works down there for a few years, gets inked up, and then comes back to LA. And so that's where Trunk Full of Zeros picks up. It picks up, I want to say, in March of 1950, and he's come back to LA, and he's gonna look into his wife's murder and try to avoid the LAPD at the same time. And he's a lot of fun. Trunk Full of Zeros, the name, by the way, was funny because that was published with Rothko Press, and I was sitting there in their offices, and we all came up with, I want to say, we probably had 25 names for the book, literally just all written down. We're like, how about this one? How about this one? How about this one? And then all of a sudden, Trunk Full of Zeros, everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. So it had lots of different names over the years, but it ended up being that one, and it's relevant also in the book, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, Sonny's an absolute blast to write, and so he's James Whelpley wrote on one of his reviews of one of the Sonny books. He wrote, Sonny Haynes does what other men boast of, and that's kind of what, to be honest with you, that's kind of what I'm going for in it, because he's not the brightest guy in the world. He's not dumb, but he's not the brightest guy in the world. He knows that. But he has a certain ability to get to the crux of a situation pretty quickly. And he is quick to act. And so that gets him in a lot of trouble sometimes, but it's a lot of fun to write. And he definitely has some one-liners and some witticisms in there that are fun. So I mean, he's a great character. and he's got Katie, who is his kind of daughter. I always say, you know, it's like kind of a little bit like a stepdaughter. His wife and he helped raise her when she was young. Her mother was a streetwalker in LA who disappeared. And so they kind of helped raise her. And so when he comes back, she's around 16, 17 years old. And so he kind of, and she's also a poker prodigy.
Oh,
So he's always picking her up and dropping her off at poker games. And she is playing at that point with a whole lot of men, obviously, in poker rooms, generally speaking, taking their money. And they're not real big on that either, with a little, you know, teenage girl taking their cash. So Sonny kind of acts as a
he's the
bodyguard
bouncer.
too. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a blast. And so I'm working on, I've got a trunk full of zeros. Outlaw Ballads is Trunk Full of Zeros is 1950. Starts in LA, ends in New Orleans. Then they go to Vegas.
Okay.
And Vegas, they go to Vegas at the end of the book. You see that. That's like the last scene. They're talking about going to Vegas. And then Outlaw Ballads picks up a year later, and it's out in Palm Springs.
Okay.
So at some point, I have to write about the lost year in Las Vegas. But I'm also working on a follow-up novel, loosely titled American Savage, that will pick up in 1952 with Sonny and Katie and Melvin Easley, who's the PI who he works with out in Palm Springs. And then Outlaw Ballads is a collection of 12 stories, almost all of which were published in various, you know, Mystery Tribune and Black Mask and a bunch of other places. And they all take place in 1951, 1952, out in Palm Springs. And Palm Springs is just an absolute blast to write because we've all read so many times. We've all read the Los Angeles noir in the 50s and 60s, right? 40s, 50s, and 60s. Yeah. But Palm Springs is a great place to write because it's only 80 plus miles away. It's where Hollywood goes even then to vacation. And you've also got the mob, and the mob looked at it as a neutral site. So you weren't supposed to do business there because people had their family and kids. So you've got the mob aspect, you've got the Hollywood aspect, you've got the retirement aspect out here, and then you have a burgeoning gay community also, kind of all at the same time coming together in the 50s. So it's a blast to write. I mean, it's great. So
you've got a really great context that you can mine for conflict. It's just it's sitting there waiting, and that's awesome. I definitely need to check out Outlaw Ballads. I wanted to ask you because short stories, I've only done like one or two at this point. So I'm curious on your perspective, how do you approach a short story compared to a novel in your writing process with it?
To be honest, I actually much prefer writing shorts because I started out as a before I wrote, well, when I first started writing, and I'm talking back in high school and college, they were novels, but that's because I didn't know what else to, I didn't know what I was doing. So you just, you know, you sit down and write, and then most of it's bad, but you know, that's okay. You got to start. But I started out after that as a poet. So, and I have 3 books of poetry out, and I've published a ton of poems. It's been a long time since I've written it, but I have a master's in professional writing from USC, and the emphasis was in poetry there. And so I think because of the economy of poetry, short stories work better for me because novels seem so sprawling. They seem so oh my God, I'm still going to be working on this in 4 months. Whereas a short story or a poem, it's like, bam, I can knock this out in 3-4 sessions. Boom, I'm done. Move on. Whereas with a novel, you really need to live with it. And so that, I think, is one of the harder parts for me. Obviously, it's not for a lot of people. Some people prefer it. I just don't think I'm one. I really like shorts. Although, like I said, I am working on that follow-up novel, and I will get it done. I'm about 80 pages in at this point. But it's definitely, I prefer shorts. And I prefer reading shorts, honestly. I really do. I grew up, like I said before, reading a whole bunch of Stephen King, and I swear it felt like, between Night Shift and different seasons and Nightmares and Dreamscapes and, so many others, it felt like I was always reading short stories by Stephen King. And, and then a little bit later, I found the Hammett short stories and Nightmare Town and Red Wind, which is Chandler, and a whole bunch of others, which is great. And I love those too, but I just love shorts, even Jim Harrison, huge Jim Harrison fan, love Jim Harrison. And he writes not so many shorts, but he writes a lot of novellas. So they're like, they're essentially like Steinbeck novels. They're like 100 pages.
Which, honestly, I think that's where I feel most comfortable. It's like, it's not too long to get me bored, but it's just enough time for me to feel like you can wrap everything up.
It's true. Yeah. And when you have 100 pages, you have a lot more time to kind of develop the characters, to develop the, the conflicts and everything else. So there's something to that. That's the one part about writing shorts that I think is difficult, is the economy of the language. I like a lot, but sometimes I will think to myself, okay, so in 25 pages, how am I going to fit in this, and this? Like, there's no way I can get to these two things. And in a novella, you can actually do that. But the problem with novellas is they're impossible to get published.
Yes.
Now, of course, I can publish them now because I can, we the four of us here can do whatever we want with Starlite. But novellas, if you're looking to get novellas published, how Jim Harrison did it he did it like in 3 or 4 books of novellas. I have no idea. But for the most part, novellas, just like short stories, collections are tough too. But novellas, man, I mean, trying to get something like that published with a major house, like a Random House or an FSG or something like that, man, come on, that it's not going to happen. So
I have to be honest, the first Starlight Review was one of the first short story collections I actually sat down and read, with the exception of, like, I grew up, my big thing was Sherlock Holmes as a kid. And obviously those short stories. But outside of that, I never really was like, oh, I'm going to read the short story collection. It just hadn't been a thing that I'd done or explored.
Interesting.
Then I picked up Starlight Review, and I loved the fact that I could read every night, just pick up and read beginning, middle, and end. We've got a complete story, rather than feeling that constant urge to keep turning the page to be able to continue the story. So, I actually got sleep. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to, it was a really good collection. Like the way that you guys organized the stories.
Yeah, the way we thought about that, and I mentioned this to my wife a few times when we were putting it together, was I almost think of it like an album. Like you're putting together an album.
That's a great perspective.
So you want a strong song or two towards the beginning, and then the middle, it's not that they're unimportant or anything like that. Far from it. It's just that you can throw in all different kinds of flavors in there, but then you want something really strong on the end also, and so that's kind of how we thought about it. And I think this collection is going to be a lot of fun. So first off, for those of you who can see this, this is Starlight Pulp Review number 2. These are the proof copies. It's going to be out in just a couple of weeks. And we've got 14 authors in here. And it starts off with a story by Jay Wiltz. And it is, it's a different take on the JFK. Murder, which is a lot of fun. And that's why we started it with that. It's because it makes people go, oh. So, because we've all heard, kind of ad nauseum, so many, it was the FBI, it was the CIA, it was Cuba, it was Russia, it was the mafia, it was, whatever. And it probably was some or all of those to some degree. But
they had a big council meeting.
This one takes let me put it like this. It's written first person, Terrence, from Jackie O's perspective.
Oh, okay.
So it's a lot of fun. And so it starts with that, and off we go. So
I'm excited. Again, the lineup looks fantastic. The book looks amazing.
Thank you.
The cover artist was Danny, last name
Galliotti. Danny Galliotti. Yeah, I've had him on the podcast too, and he's fantastic. Wonderful painter. Sorry. and he's done something. He was a Disney animator for
Oh,
years.
cool.
When he was 22 or 23 years old, he was working on The Lion King. So and he did Tarzan. He did what's called the Rosie O'Donnell monkey in Tarzan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Turk. No.
Which by the way, I didn't know, because I don't know much about animation. I didn't realize that like he was in charge of just the monkey.
Uh-huh.
Like that, so it's like each character has its own animator, which I had no idea about. And so he did that for a long time, but now he's doing a lot of just straight up fantastic paintings. You can go to DannyGalliotti.com and view a bunch of them, and they're kind of a pulpy Norman Rockwell type of style. And
it's one of the things
so
I thought was really cool about it.
Yeah. And so this one on the cover, this is it's a painting called Shit, I Broke a Nail. And she's got the cast iron skillet behind her, and she just, knocked this poor bloke down, but she's worried about her nail. And yeah, it was by Danny. It's I'm really excited about it. We're gonna have Danny on the cover in the future too. He's a friend of the label.
Mm-hmm. I mean, anytime you can build relationships like that, it's part of what I love about this community, really, is that it's got incredible people, and I always have so much fun. Like, we just had Bob Dice and Wyatt Doyle from Men's Adventure Library, who their thing is all of those men's adventure magazines.
Of course.
And like, that was some of my first introduction, was Weasels Ripped My Flesh
right
into this world. And it's so cool.
Yeah. No, it's 100% true. I mean, and we both know this, and everybody knows this that is watching or listening, that social media can be incredibly destructive sometimes and crappy. And so I want to get that out of the way first. But so far for us with Starlite, it's been pretty awesome. I mean, we've made a lot of friends, a lot of contacts, a lot of, networking, for lack of a better term. And I've really been surprised with how people have just kind of stepped up and been decent, all the way through. And I love that. That's fantastic. And so, I mean, we're meeting people all the time. Like, Skip Heller from Hollywood New Orchestra. Good friend of the label here too. And he just saw him last week in Palm Springs live. With the New Orchestra, but he's
pictures and videos looked amazing, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. But who, I didn't know him before all this started, and why would I? How would I make that contact? And all of a sudden we meet through social media, and all of a sudden we're doing podcasts, and I'm going to his shows, and he's a great guy, very learned, and can sit there and talk pulp all day long, and a whole bunch of soundtracks that I know nothing about,
and Robert Caro.
Yeah. So it's and then like you, for example. I mean, it's just really cool to be able to meet people, the American Pulps guys too, to meet people who are out there, they're in the community, they're supportive, and at the end of the day, I mean, when we started Starlite, the whole idea was to do something. It kind of seemed to me like it was something I had done in the past, but then also it seemed like there was a little bit of a space or a gap in what was, I felt like what was needed for pulp. And so it was like, and we can get into that if you want to talk about.
I was going to ask, so this is a perfect transition point. How did Starlite start?
Okay, so Starlite started because, I mean, first off, like I said, I've been writing for a long time, but but I wrote some poetry, then I wrote the novel, and Tristan is my son, and he's now 20 at almost 21 at UC Riverside, right? And so when he was born, it was the kind of thing where I was writing a lot, but then he got to be about 4 or 5 and started playing sports. And I have a background in sports, and I had coached in the 90s also. And so all of a sudden it became a thing where he's playing baseball, he's playing soccer, and they needed coaches. So all of a sudden I'm coaching, and then they need a spring select coach, and now I'm coaching that. And I'm, they need a travel ball coach, and I'm coaching that. And before you knew it, I mean, 52 weeks a year, I was probably coaching. I was on some damn field probably 40, 45 weekends a year. And so it was, and that was my life for a long time. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. It was, I had a blast doing it. It's not,
that's not the kind of thing you do unless you enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it was a good time. We had good teams. We had a blast. But then all of a sudden I got into that mode, right? Where I'm still writing. I'm still doing other stuff, but I'm writing a lot of short stories at that time, but it's still very much kind of on the back burner while I'm dadding, right?
Yeah.
I'm being a mostly a full-time dad. And then all of a sudden he goes off to high school, so that shifts a little bit, but we're still doing some of the travel soccer and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden he's done with high school, and I was kind of like, oh, what do I do now? Right? Like he doesn't need me anymore. He's off in the dorms, and my wife is off doing her thing, and she's working, and I'm kind of sitting around, and I work a lot of remote stuff, mostly at night. So I'm sitting there kind of at home during the day, like, okay, what am I doing here? And so it kind of occurred to me slowly over about a year, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I'm looking to get this collection of short stories published. I'm looking to publish short stories. And part of the thing when I'm talking about a space, part of the thing that was really frustrating for me is I have these short stories, I'm sending them off, but half the time I can't even find where to send the damn things off. It's like, I'm going on to, Thuglit isn't around anymore. Switchblade was on and off, and they were, quite frankly, kind of difficult to get information on. It wasn't updated very often, things like that. And so, I would spend an hour and a half of my time trying to send these stories off, and I might get like 2 submissions off. And the rest of the time, all I'm trying to do is find where to submit things and how, and it was like, what am I doing here? So, so it was kind of like, okay, well, when I was at USC, I worked on the Southern California Anthology, which is their magazine. And that's a very common thing, right? When you are in a writing program like that, you're essentially free labor for their anthology. It's true. I mean, that just is what it is, which, by the way, at Starlite, we don't have that, right? We don't have a whole collection of students just waiting to give their time to your review. You know what I mean? So I'm at USC, and I'm associate poetry editor, and I'm looking at this, I'm looking at short stories, fiction, all this. And I was never the one making the actual decision, right? That it wasn't the last decision. It was, is this getting passed on or not? That was what I had to do for a couple different years there. And so I had that in my back pocket, and I'm still writing, and I love noir. And for some reason, I don't know where this came from, but it was, so many people look at pulp and they think noir. And pulp is so much larger than that.
Yeah.
It's horror, it's indie, it's
Tomorrowland,
sci-fi, it's all of that.
It's pirates.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And so it was like, okay, so what can I do to kind of start this label, this brand, whatever you want to do? And then it occurred to me, I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. If I have stuff to publish and I can have done this other stuff in the past, why don't I just start working on reviews? And I've got Ryan, who works with us, who's in Starlite. Ryan Snowden, little shout out there. He's our IT guy as well as a digital artist. So anything that needs done that way, he does that. I've got my Jesse, who's my cousin, and he does a lot of the artwork. He does a lot of the design work. He also does tattooing too. So he's got that end of it. And then I've got a couple editors that I can use from time to time, and then myself. And so we all just kind of were like, hey, let's do this. Let's attach a name, let's attach a brand, let's put it all together, and let's make it easy. Let's build a website where people can go, and you can go right to submissions and just find an easy way to submit it, and that's it. It doesn't need to be such a difficult process, which was frustrating to me when I was trying to get things published and I was publishing them. It's just that it was taking forever.
Well, yeah,
and then,
it comes down to like the ratio of time spent to write the thing to time to put it out.
Without question. And that's one of the nice parts, by the way, about having an agent. For those writers who have agents, that's a very small percentage. But for those people, they don't have to worry about that. They don't do any of that. They just write a story, give it to their agent. Their agent finds a place for it. The rest of us have to go out there and go website by website by website, and they're accepting submissions. Submissions are closed here. These cost money. These don't. I can't find where to submit this. And you're going through this whole process. And so, and then the other thing, Terrence, that just absolutely boggles my mind is I sent a story off to Alfred Hitchcock. Did not expect it to get published because both Alfred Hitchcock and what's the other one, the really big one?
Mystery Ellery Queen.
Yeah, thank you. Ellery Queen. Both of them they're solid magazines. They're good magazines, but they're much more of like the closet mysteries.
Yeah.
They
have a very distinct brand.
Yeah. They're much more along the Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie lines than noir. Yeah. And so I didn't expect to get it published, but I sent it off. And we started Starlite 8 months ago, right? We planned for it months and months before that. Outlaw Ballads has been out since last December. I got a rejection for that story last week. I sent it off, I want to say in late 2021.
That's a very long.
I mean, come on. What
can I just say that this is what convinces me that magazines are dead as a medium, but that's besides the point.
That's insane. I mean, what writer out there has 15, 16 months to sit around to wait and see if a story is going to get published? Oh, and by the way, they also say, oh, we don't want simultaneous submissions. What? Like, so it's the whole process of it is just so crazy. And so what we wanted to do with Starlite was kind of streamline it and try to make it as user friendly as we can.
Yeah,
we do charge for submissions, you know that, and that's unfortunate. I wish we didn't. But flip side of that, of course, is we're not a nonprofit, and we're not affiliated with a university.
Yeah,
like most of these are. Most short story collections and anthologies, they are. Yeah. We're not, and so we don't have this army of students to come in and work for free anytime. This is all us. It's just that 4 of us or whatever. So it's we have to. I mean, we have to keep the lights on. We got to pay for the books. We got to buy the ISBNs. We got to do all that stuff, and we don't get to fundraise like a nonprofit would. So it's it is what it is. But I think that we've found a way to kind of streamline it. We've gotten a lot of good feedback, on the first issue. I think we're going to get some good feedback on this one. It's a really solid collection. And one of the guys who's in it, by the way, who nobody mentions that I want to give a little shout out. His name's Daniel Pine, and he's one of 14 authors, and he's excellent. For whatever reason, he's not that well known, but he's got 4 or 5 books out. Okay. And he's also worked on screenplays too. And he had one book called 29 Palms, and it was written about a decade ago, and it's excellent, really good noir, and really kind of stylish cover too, if you can find it. I don't think I have it with me right now.
Definitely got to look it up then. 29 Palms.
Yeah. And but he's in this too, and so a lot of people mention the Nolan Knights. They mention the Frank Bills, and as well they should, of course. But but I think people are going to be pretty happy and surprised with the Daniel Pine story. It's pretty cool.
Well, part of what I love about
what's that?
I was going to say part of what I love about the short story collection is then I get stories of little mini tastes of each author, and then it gives me opportunity to go, I want more of that. Where can I find
exactly? Oh, without question. Yeah. And what's interesting about this one is every collection takes on its entirely own personality. we never go into an anthology going, oh, okay, we have to have at least 5 noir stories. We have to have 2 Westerns. We have to have, 3 science fiction. It doesn't work that way. And then quite frankly, it's difficult to even put labels on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like a lot of transgressive fiction, a lot of, there's a lot of genre bending, out there in terms of what might be horror versus
thriller
versus sci-fi. You know what I mean? Like the story I have in this collection is kind of it reads like a Western, but it's kind of a dystopian futuristic Western because they're on their horses passing husks of cars that haven't run for 40 years. So it reads like a Western, it sounds like a Western, but I think actually, funny enough, if it were put in a genre, it'd probably be sci-fi.
Yeah.
Well, even though it looks like a Western. So but one thing I want to say is that's so cool about this is that, like I said, we don't have any kind of quota in terms of how many of whatever. And we got a lot of in this issue for some reason is war.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got one story called The Damn Fools by Doc Clancy, which is a lot of fun, and it is Korea.
Okay.
So the Korean War. And then the Daniel Pine story has to do with a CIA newbie who's dropped off in Korea in 1952.
Okay.
And then we have a story in here called The Gentleman and the Brat, and by Eric Esquivel, who's out of LA. And he is this story is kind of almost along the superhero lines, but takes place in World War II.
Okay.
And so it's, and there was none of that in the first review. And none of us sat around and went, oh, let's get a bunch of war stories. That didn't happen. And yet there's at least 3 of them in here that we're really excited for. So it's really neat to put these together just because you never know what you're going to get. The submissions are the things that tell the story,
It's fascinating how every creative act becomes its own thing so many times. It's never, if it feels like it's the same every time, that's probably a bad sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's totally true. And with this, like, we don't have any in this, which is sad for me, but oh well. We don't have any traditional Westerns in this one. We had a couple in the first one. In this one, we've got, like I said, the dystopian Western, which I shouldn't say it's cool, it's mine. So but I like it.
Sounds cool so far. I'm looking forward to it.
But it's got noir, it's got these kind of war adventure stories. The Damn Fools one, the Korean War one, actually, I mean, it ends up being almost horror, supernatural, but takes place in a war. So it's a lot of fun to put these together. And I can't tell you, Terrence, if there was one thing when I started this, if there was one thing that I would say has surprised me the most at this point, it's been how much fun I'm having publishing other writers.
That's awesome.
It's a blast. It's a blast. And the flip side of that, right, is that I'm going to be completely honest with you. The first few times in both reviews so far, the rejection notices I've sent out, not my favorite.
Yeah.
Not my favorite, because as writers, we've all been there. We all, we all get the form letter, and I get it. I'll try to make it as least like that as I can.
Yeah. But
at the same time, a rejection's a rejection. Like there's no, you can't sugarcoat it. It is what it is. And so that's hard. But even that has been, I don't want to say rewarding, that's not the right word, but it's been smoother, I guess, than I expected, because I can't tell you how many rejection notices I've sent out, and the writer who got the rejection notice has written us back thanking us for reading it or for taking it in consideration or for giving them
Yeah.
feedback or whatever, which is super cool because I am Starlite is a part of CLMP, which is the community of literary magazines and presses, right? And we wanted to do that right off the bat to just kind of make it legit. But because of that, in CLMP, I get these emails that are large branch emails with like hundreds and hundreds of CLMP members from all different, New Orleans Review and Philadelphia Journal and, Plowshares and all these wonderful reviews. And some of the nightmare stories I hear on that are terrifying. About this writer's threatening to sue because of this, and this writer's work was accepted, and it's been published, but now he wants us to pull it out, and all this stuff where you're just like, what is happening? And so far we haven't had any of that. I'm going to knock on some wood here, but so far we haven't had any of that it's all been really, positive, for lack of a better word, but it's been a lot of fun to put together. And the writers that I have to say no to, I feel for them. I do, because I've been, God, I don't care who you are as a writer, you're going to get a hell of a lot more rejection.
I mean, that's
so,
I hope that my attitude has always just been, that's part of the gig. Like,
yeah.
Otherwise, why do you do this? There are easier ways of just, if you just wanted to have it out there, you could put it on a blog.
Yeah.
Just accept the fact that it's part of the process. You made the comment about the genre bending thing. A great book that is unfortunately far too dense for me to just get through, but fascinating. John Truby's Anatomy of Genre. And his comment in the book I thought was really good, which is, we are entering a day and age where the successful stories are the ones that transcend genre. And by doing that, usually they mix in genre elements of other stories. And I 100% believe that's true, because look, Marvel movies are the biggest thing out there. So the best Marvel movies, though, are the ones that were not just, this is a superhero movie. It was Captain America, Winter Soldier, where this is a spy thriller that just happens to have superheroes.
Right. No, absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. And when we started Starlite, one of the things was, first off, let's embrace all of the pulp, right?
Yes.
All of the horror, the supernatural, the westerns. A lot of people don't think of westerns when they think of pulp. Absolutely. So let's involve all of that. But the other thing I don't get is that when you look at the top 10 movies on Netflix, or the top 10 movies in the last 5 years that have been released, they're almost all pulp. Almost all. And yet getting genre fiction published is hard. And if you send off a piece of genre fiction to, say, a Plowshares or a New Orleans Review, you're going to get rejected out of hand. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, when we were putting this together and talking about what we wanted to do, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, everything that we read and watch is either pulp or has some aspects of it. And yet the majority of pulp genre fiction is looked down on, which I don't get at all. It's like there's a disconnect there that I just don't understand. I mean, if this is what people want to read and this is what people want to watch, why do we need more literary fiction about,
which no one wants to read,
some professor's midlife crisis in Ohio, for Christ's sake? What, why? So I, and I'm sure, I'm just crapping all over literary fiction here, I know, but I just don't understand why that's real writing, that's real fiction, and genre fiction isn't. And and what's hilarious about it, Terrence, is that when you get big enough, even if you are genre fiction, they look the other way. Like Cormac McCarthy, almost everything is written could be qualified as genre fiction. But
Stephen King,
because he's so great, we don't look at that as genre fiction. He's Cormac McCarthy, and it's like, come on, that's silly. Stephen King, of course, everything he's ever written has been pulp fiction.
Neil Gaiman, everything is very much like a pulp thing. Yet it wins awards, and people just go, "Oh no, this is wonderful." And you're like, see a sense of little hypocrisy here in the pulp
Exactly.
publishing industry.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, there's so, I mean, one of the other things about this is meeting so many people, doing these podcasts, talking with so many other writers. It's magnificent the amount of information that we get to pull in, but at the same time, it's crazy, you know, talking with somebody like Peter Ferris, for example, on the podcast recently. His dad was a writer, and off the podcast, he shared some stories with me, which obviously I won't get into. I don't want to, you know, betray his confidence. But the point is that some of the shadier aspects of the publishing industry that most people wouldn't know, because he grew up with a writer as a dad. So he has some background knowledge of this stuff. And so, you know, you hear about quote unquote bestseller. Well, you know, that bestseller, that New York Times bestseller, is a bestseller because, you know, Pegasus or Thrift Books bought 4,000 copies of it the first week it was out so that they can sell it at a discounted rate 3 months from now. And it made the bestseller list because of that. That's not a bestseller.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, come on. So, and there are, you know, he said there are, you know, he could list 20 examples that would make your toes curl about, you know, so-called top-notch writers. And it's all this thing of just the industry trying to, it's like cover their ass in some way. It's
justify their existence.
Yeah. And they're the gatekeepers, right? They're the ones who get to decide, oh, we read this person, not this person. And it's like, I just, you know, I'm kind of so tired of all of that. So that's why we did this.
Yeah. I mean, actually, so we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I wanted to ask you about the Starlite Pulpcast.
Yeah.
Because it's been an absolute delight to watch and listen to. Tell me, did you guys plan on starting the podcast right from the start? How did it get started? And what do you guys have coming down the pipeline on it?
You know, Ryan, who's our IT guy, and he's awesome. He edits it, he renders it, he does the backgrounds on it and stuff like that. I've actually had a couple other podcast people on Instagram contact me about like, hey, what do you do for that? And I'm like, got me. I'm like, ask Ryan. I have no idea. So he is the you know, IT engineer that allows it all to happen. And I have experience with Zoom and with doing classes and stuff like that. So for me, it was just kind of like, we already do this, so why not just open it up to writers, give and you know, because you have your own podcast, when you're doing the podcast, it's all about the guest. You know, you're just trying to transition from point to point and move it forward. So the whole idea is to give this individual kind of a platform, right? And what I've found, funny enough, you might find the same thing, is when you put a name on it, Suit Up Podcast, Starlite Pulpcast, when you put a name on it and you say, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? Because it's essentially about you, everybody goes, oh, sure. You know, it's been really easy to get people to come on because it's essentially an opportunity to talk about yourself, your product, and your art for 45 minutes to an hour. And who doesn't want to do that? Who's an artist? You know, every once in a while, I have gotten some. I'm sure you have too. I've gotten some where I don't ever hear anything back. You know, I'll write to somebody and I don't hear anything back. That's fine. You know, you go up the ladder a little bit, you know, in terms of the artists, and all of a sudden it gets a little bit, you know, hard. They're harder to reach. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, so, but for the most part, it's been a blast. And I mean, I've had some musicians on. Deke Dickerson, the country musician, was on, and I would love to get a couple other bands and musicians out there. I've got this guy coming on in the fall who I'm really excited about. His name, I don't know if I'm going to get his name right, but he's a cowboy, and I mean straight up just a cowboy. I mean a real cowboy. You know, on a ranch, tending fences,
that is awesome.
Working with horses, 14 hours a day, cowboy, and that's going to be a lot of fun. You know, and so we do a lot of writers, of course, and I know writing it's easy to get writers because writers want to talk about their books. Of course they should. I do too. So, I'm not denigrating them for that, of course. But so writers we're going to get, but reaching out and getting some of those other people that we can kind of tie into the pulp lifestyle. It's a lot of fun. It's cool to get it out there. And I don't know. I mean, when we set up this whole thing, we wanted to create something where people would associate, oh, that's Starlite, and kind of have it in their brain associating it. It's adjacent with lots of some other things as well besides just books. Now, don't get me wrong, the books are the focus, and they're going to continue. But yeah, we did want to get the podcast out. We did want to sell some T-shirts. We wanted to sell some hoodies. We want to put the brand on things because it's kind of I don't know that many, like you don't see any Random House shirts.
No. Well, it's the difference between the independent publishing and the sphere of, I almost compare it to bands. I really think that that's actually a really great way. It's like a music label.
Absolutely.
Or a movie studio even. Like I bought Warner Brothers to celebrate their 100th anniversary. I bought a mug that has the Warner Brothers 100 logo on it because I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like the punk rock ethos or the indie band kind of thing, which is, let's put a label on there. Let's go ahead and sell some T-shirts. Let's sell some hoodies. Let's kind of get that out there, because it doesn't seem like in the literary world, at least, people do that much. And,
like
I don't know why. So
I'm the nerd that when like we had Nolan Knight on the show, and he has the little buttons that follow me to Gallows Dome, which is such a cool idea. There's movie merch that comes out all the time. I want more like book related merch. Like when a book comes out, when I did my romance novel, I put together like this package collection of here are things that are like referred to in the book. And it was like a mug from the coffee shop that was in it and stuff like that. Just it gives the world more. It's more interesting for like the world building, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And the idea of a brand or branding, I think kind of gives a negative connotation a lot of the time. And I'm not sure why per se, because when you're an indie brand, you have to do something to try to get that out there.
Well, and it's not like you have to more often than not today. Like I have these Suit Up mugs, which anyone watching this, if you want a mug, feel free to go into our Teespring store. But like it isn't as hard as it used to be. It's not like you have to typically have it so much inventory. A lot of this stuff, there are outlets for it, which is great. And it's one of those things where we're like, the internet sucks in a lot of ways, but it does give us this, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I mean, there's it's, I don't know. It's just, it's interesting because like you said, the kind of products and associations, I guess, with things around that literary piece or that movie or whatever it might be. Like Nevada McPherson, she always does her playlist, her Spotify playlist for each book.
Great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Exactly. And, we mentioned it earlier, but, something like, we sit around in Starlight and we kind of go, well, what about this idea? What about that idea? It's Starlite Pulp, it's noir, it's why not do a pomade? And or I'm not saying we're going to, it's just, we just throw stuff out there like, why not? Like we mentioned before, why not do a bootlegger rye?
Yeah.
Which would fit in perfect. Now, of course, you have to have the marketing behind it, you have to have the distillery, you have to have all that stuff. But the point is that, why not? And it never changes. It doesn't do anything to the books.
Yeah.
That's the thing. At the end of the day, it's about the books. It's about the authors. And that's what's going to, let me put it like that. That's the anchor.
Yes.
That's the anchor for the brand, always. But if we can do some other stuff and get the logo out there and get the name out there, that's awesome. So and again, I'm not saying we're the only ones out there doing it. I'm sure we're not, but I don't see much of it. You don't see much of it. Like you said, people release a book, they release a book. That's it. Whereas you could do so many other things with it. And it's a little bit like when I order something from a company and I get that product. So I ordered, say a shirt or jacket or whatever, and I get that. And in that, they send a photo of this and they send 3 different stickers and they send something else. And I'm like, yes, like that's really cool. I didn't order it. I didn't ask for it, but they sent it. I love that. And it's the same kind of thing with us. Like when we send out books, we always put stickers in there. We put postcards in there. We put other stuff because it's like, the little swag on the side, that stuff matters. I mean, it's fun. People collect it. They like it. Grizzly Pulp has a bunch that they do. Doc Clancy sent me the most recent Caveman magazine. That was cool. And he sent a bunch of stuff with it too. And it's like, I don't know, there's just something about it. And you don't see the really larger companies doing that kind of stuff. It's always indie kind of brands. And that's pretty cool.
Brian, this has been an amazing conversation. I've had a blast. I'm going to ask you one more question before we wrap up here, which is, what do you have a writing routine? And if so, what does it look like?
Okay, with poetry, it used to be I wrote at night. Like I would write at night, just period, end of story. And when I was really going well, it was a little Bukowski like, but when I was really going well, I could knock out anywhere between 1 and 3 to 4 poems a night, easy. And then you go back, you give them a little edit the next couple of days, things like that. But for the most part, they might be done. But with stories, usually it's mornings, funny enough. I'll wake up and I'll usually get some coffee and almost immediately go to the story, take a look at what was done the day prior. And that usually gets me right kind of in the mode, if you want. And then boom, just go from there. And I really don't put a time limit on it. It's one of those things when you're going well, and if it's 45 minutes, it's 45 minutes. If it's 2.5 hours, it's 2.5 hours. And never the twain shall meet. But and with the novel, it's kind of all over the place. I hate to say it, but again, with the novel, like I said, you gotta kind of live with it,
Yeah.
So it's like you're getting ideas all the time, and you'll think of something, and all of a sudden, like literally, some days you'll be there and you'll think, oh my gosh, that character I introduced in chapter 2, I was supposed to do something with him by now. I haven't brought him up in 50 pages. Damn it. So there's things like that where you just kind of got to go back, but you're always, with a novel, you're always tweaking it. You're always, it's like I said, you live with it. Whereas short story, usually anywhere between 3 and 5 sessions, depending on the length, sometimes a little more, depends, but 3 to 5 good solid sessions, then some editing sessions after that. And usually that'll be about it. So it kind of depends. The process is different for all of them, but yeah.
Well, it's awesome. Thank you. I always find it interesting to hear what people's process looks like, because it is so much of an individualistic thing.
Oh, it
where
totally is. Yeah.
Every writer kind of has their own thing that works. There's similarities, definitely, depending on the person, but because at the end of the day, it's sitting down and writing. But seeing what makes that work for people, I think, is fascinating.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where as long as it works for you, it's all good.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if you're somebody who gets up, who wakes themselves up at 1 a.m. and writes till 3, and that works for you. Okay. There's nobody to sit there and tell you, no, you can't do that. If it works, it works.
So, words aren't made at 1 a.m. in the morning, Brian.
Sometimes slurred words.
That definitely happens. Brian, this has been an absolute blast. Where can people go to learn more about you, your work, and Starlite Pulp?
Just go to starlightpulp.com and pretty much everything is there. We also have the Instagram. You can check us out there. And in terms of my work personally, it was the kind of thing when we started Starlite, and I promise I won't make this long, but when we started Starlite, it was like I've been publishing with other people for a long time, for decades. And it was kind of like, well, wait a minute, if we're going to publish people, then I'm going to publish myself, right? like this is dumb. So from this point on with Starlite, anything by me will just go out through Starlite, unless I send a story off to an anthology or something that somebody asked for. Other than that, it'll be through Starlite. So you can just go to starlightpulp.com. We got merch, we got tees, we got hoodies, we got stickers, we got books. We got the brand new book coming out, and I'm hoping you're going to dig this one, Terrence.
I am so excited. It looks fantastic. Everything I've heard so far just makes me more and more excited for it.
It's 310 pages of goodness. So, anyways,
All right.
awesome being on. Thanks, Terrence.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, man.